This isn't a scene from a movie. A double-decker bus once jumped the gap while London's Tower Bridge was up. Let's go back to the day it happened, the 30th of December, 1952. It was a normal day for the number 78 bus driver, Albert Gunter. He was driving the bus over Tower Bridge toward Shoreditch. Then he noticed that the bridge was opening, and his bus was escalating with the bascule. What do I mean by bascule? The two levered sections of the bridge are named this way. They rise up to an angle of 83 degrees, and each of them weighs over 1,100 tons. The bus was going at just 12 miles per hour when the bascule started to rise. The timing was right, and the other side of the bascule wasn't raised too much. That's how Gunter managed to jump the bus from 3 to 4 feet high above. 13 people were injured, but all passengers stayed alive. How come the bridge was lifted? Back then, a watchman rang a warning bell and closed the gates before the bridge had to be opened. Yet, on that particular day, they somehow forgot to do so. That's why the bus moved further onto the bridge, thinking it was okay. Why were they lifting the sections in the first place? Because there was a ship that needed to pass under. The bus driver, Albert Gunter, said that the traffic light was also green as he drove across the bridge. He said he'd had two options, either to stop the bus and hope someone would notice the bus, or to jump the gap. If he stopped the bus, he could slip back, perhaps fall into the river. Big congrats to this hero without a cape for making the right decision in a split second. Not just a double-decker, but a plane also has a memory of passing through the Tower Bridge. In 1912, a plane had to fly between the bascules and the walkway. The vertical distance between the upper walkways and the deck of the drawbridge is 141 feet. The pilot, Francis McLean, was in a modified float plane that could fit in between. This is how he managed to fly successfully. He was the first person to fly under the walkways. For many of us, it's super risky and frightening. But for him, it was like a piece of cake. He told the press, "It isn't so risky as it appears, for the arches of the bridges are tremendous things when you get close to them." This fellow was a civil engineer, astronomer, pioneering photographer, and aviator. Yeah, sounds like he was the perfect combo for this kind of action. Why did he decide to do this? Thing was, he had an appointment in town. It all happened on a Saturday morning. McLean thought, why wouldn't he go there with his float plane? He took off at 6 a.m. He was at Westminster Pier on a Port of London launch at around 8:30 a.m. Want to hear a story from a prankster who lived in early 1800s London? Theodore Hook and his friend were hanging out as usual. Then they made a bet. Hook bet that he could turn any ordinary house into the most talked about address within a week. The power of a hoax is proven by him. They picked a random house in the city. An ordinary woman named Mrs. Tottingham was living there. Hook wrote numerous letters to many people, from lawyers to cake makers. After a week, guests such as the governor of the Bank of England and the Lord Mayor of London showed up at the door because they had invitations. Not just people, but also the delivery Hook secretly ordered came along too. The heart of London soon turned to a standstill. Picture this. You woke at 5 a.m. after hearing the doorbell. You see a stranger at the doorstep. He says that he's here to sweep the chimneys. You didn't call anyone for this kind of service, so you sent the man back. A few moments later, someone else knocks on the door. Another sweeper tells you that he has been summoned. Poor Mrs. Tottingham. Her maid had to send 20 more men back. Unfortunately, the prank didn't end there. Things like large coal deliveries and wedding cakes were also addressed to her house. As these deliveries and workers accumulated at the door, other people, such as doctors and priests, approached the house, saying that they were called to minister to someone in the house. Hook and his friend rented a small room nearby to watch where their bet ended up. People did show up and made Hook win the bet. Rick Buckley is another person who likes practical jokes, but he is also an artist. In 1997, he modeled his nose and stuck it on various places in London with glue. Pardon? Yes, his aim was to protest against CCTV. Such a creative mixture of prank and art. Initially, he glued the noses around 35 landmarks across London. Amongst all, the 7 noses of Soho are famous. I guess he doesn't like people poking their noses into other people's businesses. It's time for free association. From the noses placed in random places in the city, it's time to jump into older times, when people used toxic cosmetics on their faces for the sake of beauty. I'll refer to a trendsetter of her time, Queen Elizabeth I. She had a major influence on fashion. Not just women's clothes, but also the style of men got influenced by her choice of wardrobe. Here I'm going to talk more about her iconic white look. This look is achieved by a white foundation called ceruse. It's made by mixing white lead and vinegar. In that era, people also wanted to bleach freckles and treat blemishes. These types of cosmetics included ingredients like sulfur, turpentine, and mercury. As you can guess, these ingredients are harmful. They end up leaving the skin gray and shriveled. I'm not even going to mention other health issues magic cosmetics caused. Michael Holmes is a pro skydiver and canopy parachutist. No, he isn't a relative of Sherlock Holmes. He's on my list because he survived against all odds. One day, he was instructing new skydivers. It started as a routine day for him. He was on the plane with 16 students. They were going to jump from 15,000 feet. The process was simple on paper. They would allow a free fall for about a minute and then open their canopies at 5,000 feet. That day, things didn't go as planned. Michael released the parachute and it didn't open. He spent seconds trying to get rid of the main parachute so that he could open the reserve one. As he was struggling, he was also continuously spinning. He described the free fall as, "I was spinning so fast that I was nearly passing out from the G-force." He was in a similar situation before, when he had to unsnag the fine cords between the harness and the canopy. He knew that he had a backup and that this system was safe, so he didn't panic. Well, at least at the beginning. This time he couldn't lose the main canopy. As he was around 4,000 feet, he decided to pull the second parachute, and nothing happened. He was trying to stay calm and find a way to land safely. The lines were still snagged, so the main canopy was still there. He couldn't reach the small knife. He had to cut the lines. What was even worse than spinning was that time was ticking. He was running out of options while moving closer to the ground at a speed of around 80 miles per hour. He had a head camera recording the incident the whole time. After he tried all the options and nothing worked, he waved goodbye to the lens. Luckily, his story didn't end like this. Remember what I said at the beginning? This fellow miraculously survived. He landed on a blackberry bush around 2 miles above Lake Taupo in New Zealand. He didn't have a severe injury. That means a person can fall from the sky and survive if the conditions are right. What would you do if you were in that situation? Calls, internet pages, malicious links. Those are the ways someone can scam you in the 21st century. But what if someone tried to sell you the Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, or even the Brooklyn Bridge? Hard to believe, but all of these, and so many other similar things, happened throughout history. You may have already heard of George C. Parker, one of the most fascinating American con artists that mostly operated in the late 1800s. Con man is usually a term for a person who tricks others. First, they gain their trust and then persuade them into believing something that's not true. Parker was a native New Yorker, and he made his living by making illegal sales of landmark items he didn't really own. He managed to sell popular properties, such as the Statue of Liberty, Madison Square Garden, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and, of course, the Brooklyn Bridge. That's the one he's best known for. He repeatedly sold the bridge, at least twice a week. One time, he even got to a price of $50,000. The new owner wouldn't even know he was a victim of a con until the New York police officers would stop them from doing things you'd normally be able to do on your own property, like setting up toll booths in the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge opened for business at the end of the 19th century. It was a toll bridge, which means pedestrians had to pay money every time they wanted to cross it. Riders with horses had to pay 5 cents, and if you had a horse and wagon, it would cost you 10 cents. Tens of thousands of people would cross the bridge every day as they were heading to work from Brooklyn to Manhattan. A couple of years later, this pedestrian toll was repealed, so some obviously thought they could bring it back. Parker would often choose different names, such as Warden Kennedy, James J. O'Brien, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Roberts, and so on, while pursuing his scams. He also used multiple methods to present himself as the legal owner of properties he was selling. For example, forging documents to make his cons more believable, and setting up fake sales offices when needed. Also, when he sold Grant's tomb, he posed as the general's grandson. One of the most popular places he'd operate was Ellis Island. He'd wait for people coming from different countries, especially those who had money they wanted to invest in some new enterprises. His favorite target wasn't just people who wanted to move to the US, but tourists on their first visit to New York. What a welcome, huh? The United Kingdom had a man who did a similar thing, but in the opposite direction. Arthur Ferguson was selling famous English national monuments and other public properties to tourists coming from the US during the 1920s. He sold monuments like Big Ben, Nelson's Column in Trafalgar Square, and Buckingham Palace. And yes, he'd also sell such buildings over and over again, finding different buyers for them. He managed to scam so many people because buyers were not informed well. Plus, they were too embarrassed to tell their stories in public once they found out the truth. Ferguson then went to the United States and sold the White House to a rancher who had to pay $100,000 yearly. Like George Parker, Ferguson also tried to sell the Statue of Liberty to a tourist from Australia. The man wanted to buy the impressive structure, but he couldn't collect the money in time. Ferguson was getting more and more impatient, bringing it up all the time and pushing his buyer to get the money. The buyer pretty soon grew very suspicious. Finally, he decided to share the entire story with the police. They finally managed to catch Ferguson. He was sentenced to 5 years because they found out about some other scams he did in the past. The Eiffel Tower was made available for sale too, somewhere in the 1930s. Victor Lustig was another famous con man who was 46 years old at the time. He rocked jazz-era America as well as the rest of the world. While in Paris, he made an enormous business deal. He actually sold the Eiffel Tower, and not just once, but twice. Victor's deal was pretty simple. He set up meetings with people who needed scrap iron. He convinced them the Eiffel Tower was going to be demolished because it was in desperate need of repair. So, whoever offers the biggest price gets the materials. He was a charming man with strong communication skills that helped him convince his buyers that the Eiffel Tower was really going to become theirs after that purchase. He had dozens of fake passports, often changing names while making illegal business deals. There's an interesting local legend told in Wichita Falls, Texas. In 1919, one man, J.D. McMahon, had an idea to convince people who lived there he was going to build a large property that would stretch far in the air, something we'd call a skyscraper today. He collected $200,000 and then constructed a building that was only 4 stories high. It was 16 feet deep and 10 feet wide, way smaller than it was supposed to be. The measurement he presented in the paperwork wasn't in feet, but in inches, which, as a detail, investors kinda overlooked. The investor who came up with the original idea, of course, ran off with his windfall. leaving the embarrassment called the world's littlest skyscraper behind. Back in the 18th century, a woman called Barbara Erni traveled across and around Liechtenstein. During her trip, she would tote a big trunk secured to her back. She lived a nomadic existence, which is why she'd often make stops to try to get lodging for the night. Every time she stopped, Ernie would tell her innkeeper that her most valuable items were in her trunk. Then she'd ask the owner to lock the trunk in the most secure room in the inn. The innkeepers obliged. They weren't aware there weren't jewels or clothes inside of the trunk. It was actually her traveling buddy who would then spring out of the trunk, grab all the valuables, and then run away with Ernie again. And that's something that lasted for 15 years, until they finally caught the traveling duo. A furniture salesman, Ed Barbara, from the San Francisco Bay Area, discovered his business formula back in the 1970s and 1980s. He peppered that region with commercials that irritated people very much. Then he took it to another level. At one point, he told everyone he had a 50% interest in the Golden Gulch gold mine right next to Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. Everyone heard the story that the site was ready to excavate gold, and we're talking about a lot of gold, worth as much as $93 million in the first year only. His company sold shares, which netted the salesman big profits. Of course, all that was a con. A certain truck driver didn't have a job in 2010, so he came up with a pretty unusual idea. He tried to sell the Ritz Hotel in London for almost $300 million. Not bad for the person who wants to buy it, considering the real value was going up to over $700 million. The driver was pretending he was a good friend of the owners of this fancy hotel. He also introduced himself as their associate. He said the owners had their own reasons to sell the hotel through a third party, and they couldn't discuss them. His buyer even handed him over $1 million as an initial fee. The driver then told him he got an even better offer, so he would pass the offer to another buyer, but wouldn't return the money. People tried to sell bizarre things on the internet too. For example, in the early 2000s, when the internet was only rising, and many people didn't even understand the concept of online shopping yet, one man from Australia tried to sell a whole country on eBay. Yep, you could buy New Zealand in a 1-month auction, and the starting price was 0.01 Australian dollars. Some potential buyers took this pretty seriously, so the price got to $3,000 before eBay stopped it.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.